Out of the three main topics of quantum technology, quantum sensing is the one that probably will be reach application or widespread application status the first.
I know you are working with the diamond, so okay, maybe you can tell us about how you use the diamond.
So we are actually interested in the impurities in the diamond. So when you look at diamonds, and the few I have here, you can see that they often have different colors. So
what do you think, our brain is quantum system or classical?
These nitrogen vacancy centers are spins, so electronic spins. So basically they act as tiny compass needles. Applications, hard drives, or maybe spintronics, so the idea to make electronics but using spins instead of current for it. When you can measure magnetic fields, you can also measure current. Because every current will produce a magnetic field. So if you map out the magnetic field, you can then reconstruct what the underlying current is. For example, temperature is quite interesting because you can use these diamonds and put them inside living cells. Of course it's a quantum system because chemistry is going on inside us, and chemistry is quantum physics basically in the end. They can be used for navigation by using the Earth magnetic field. So the Earth magnetic field, it's a very old technology, right? It doesn't sound super exciting.
Hello everyone, it's Service 96 again. Today we're going to talk about quantum technologies and specifically quantum sensing and quantum informations. Today I invited a guest, PhD student at the University of Rostock, Paul Weinbenner. Thank you, Paul, for agreeing to give this interview.
Thanks for having me.
So, I would like to talk about your specialty. So you work in this field, right? I think the group you're working on called quantum technology.
Yes.
But usually I heard a lot of words with the quantum, like quantum information technology, quantum sensing, quantum computing, so many things. So could you explain, could you tell us what's quantum technology in simple terms?
So I would say that quantum technology is using quantum mechanics for applications. So quantum mechanics is now 100 years old this year, 2025, and it started as just explaining our world, right? So there were phenomena that you couldn't explain, so you needed new physics. And by now we are at a point where we see that this new physics actually has a lot of interesting applications. And then it's the overarching term that we would use to describe these three topics. So quantum computing, probably the most prominent one, quantum information, and quantum sensing. Okay,
I see. Okay, let's talk about the quantum sensing. I really don't know what's this quantum sensing and what things can you measure with these sensors. So can you tell us about this quantum sensing?
Yeah, sure. So the definition is quite broad, and one could say that it's either using a quantum system to perform a measurement of some physical quantity, or to use a measurement technique that uses some quantum mechanics features. So, for example, the first thing, an example would be to use a single atom as a sensor. So a single atom inherently, in order to understand it, we need quantum mechanics, so it's a quantum mechanical object. And for the latter part, it would be, for example, using superposition or entanglement, so things that are like properties that are quantum mechanical, and using them in a measurement to, for example, achieve higher sensitivity compared to classical sensors that are not quantum, or to measure new things that maybe couldn't have been measured before.
Okay, then you typically use the quantum process, like quantum physics, to measure something, but the way you implement this could be different, right? There are so many
Yes,
things, right?
yeah, so there's many different platforms that you could say are quantum sensors, similar to quantum computing, so there's different approaches to build a quantum computer, and these are kind of the fundamentals, so every quantum sensor would either be a quantum system in itself or just use some quantum mechanical properties.
Okay, I see. How is it different than the usual sensors we already use in our everyday life?
Well, it's probably very different platforms. So it's, as I said, highly unusual things that you would normally not build a sensor out of. For example, like superconducting structures or single atoms. And usually the idea behind using these new platforms is to make a measurement with higher sensitivity, or as I said, to find some new quantity, or like measure a new quantity that you cannot measure with a classical sensor.
Okay.
And then it's often very different how you read out the sensor. So this is the important part, that a quantum sensor, you want to measure the information and then you want to get the information by reading it out. And often it's quite more difficult than a classical sensor. So for example, like measuring temperature, you would use a resistance and just use a multimeter to measure changes of resistance with temperature. And with a quantum system, often you need much more complicated setups to perform a measurement.
Could you give an example? For example, what kind of quantity can you measure?
Yes, so I mean we can go straight away to the actual system that we are using.
Okay, maybe later. So.
Maybe later, okay. Well, I mean you could measure temperature, for example, as well with a quantum sensor. But very interesting is measuring magnetic fields, electric fields. You could measure pressure, so like normal things that can also be measured by classical sensors, but often in a more with higher sensitivity.
Okay, I see. Okay. Actually nowadays most of the people, if I say like I work with the quantum physics, most of the people ask me like when we're gonna have quantum computer, or I mean the most of the people are interested in quantum computers. So I was wondering, like, this quantum sensing could be the part of this quantum computers. Like, this is the one of the tools we have to have.
I would say that. So between quantum computers and quantum sensors, there is a significant overlap. So there are certain criteria for systems that they have to have in order to be usable as a quantum computer and be usable as a quantum sensor. But often it's not the case that you can use a system for both computation and sensing, just because some systems have some advantages that are more suitable for using them for quantum computing, some are more suitable for quantum sensing.
Okay, I see.
What is your answer to people asking when we'll have a quantum computer?
I usually say I don't know, maybe in the next 10 years or 20 years we're gonna have this computers, but right now it's in the level of research, and that's it. So
I would say that out of the three main topics of quantum technology, quantum sensing is the one that probably will be reach application or widespread application status the first, before all of the others. So I mean long before quantum computing, that will take a long time probably, and quantum sensing is already being used for applications actually.
Okay, I see. But in this quantum sensing, you don't need a very low temperature, right?
Yeah, so this depends on the system. You can have quantum sensors where you need a low temperature, but for some of the interesting applications, there are actually quantum sensors that work at room temperature. And so these are especially interesting for applications then. And this is also something that if you compare it to quantum computing, you often see like huge experimental setups, cooling down, a lot of engineering involved. And we are kind of using this disadvantage there for quantum computers, that these systems are fragile and they are very sensitive to outside influences. And this is exactly what you want for the sensor in the end, to be able to be very sensitive to some outside quantity.
Okay, maybe you can tell us about the platform you are using as a quantum in the quantum sensing. I mean, I know you are working with the diamond, so okay, maybe you can tell us about how you use the diamond and what kind of platform do you use.
Yes, so we are actually interested in the impurities in the diamond. So when you look at diamonds and the few I have here, you can see that they often have different colors. So what you're usually used to imagine, like if you imagine a diamond, it would probably be a very transparent crystal. But actually they can have some color, for example, like yellow here, almost black in some cases. And this then comes from impurities in the diamond. So these are other atoms beside carbon that are integrated into this diamond lattice. And these are usually called color centers because they give color to the diamond. And it turns out that one of these color centers is actually very interesting because of its properties for quantum sensing. And this is a special case where in the diamond lattice you have a nitrogen atom that replaces a carbon atom, and next to it, on the other lattice side, a carbon atom is missing. So this is what we call the nitrogen vacancy center, and this has some really amazing properties for quantum sensing.
I see. Is this diamond like specifically designed diamond, or you can just pick any diamond from the ring, or you can just use it in the experiment?
Yes. So probably you would find some of these impurities in natural diamonds, just because nitrogen is a very is an element that is all around us, and it's integrated quite easily into the carbon lattice. But for our experiments, we want to create these color centers, these defects, in a deterministic way. So we usually want to be able to have a diamond where we know the density of these defects and where they are in the diamond. And apart from this, we also want to make sure that we only have these impurities, because you can have other types of impurities. You can have different elements, boron, you can have not a nitrogen vacancy center, but just a nitrogen replacing a carbon atom. And these often don't have, or like these don't have these properties that we want, and actually bad for our measurement because they introduce some noise.
Okay. Why diamond? I mean, the diamond is expensive, isn't it?
Yes, that's an unfortunate coincidence. So it just happens that this specific structure or this specific defect in diamond has these properties. So you could also imagine to have a nitrogen vacancy defect in some other type of crystal. But then it would not have the same electronic structure and therefore not have the same properties and cannot be used for quantum sensing.
Okay.
So diamond, the fact that it's in diamond has has a lot of disadvantages.
Okay. For the experiment, you just take the diamonds from someone else which created already, or you did it like, I mean, how you put the nitrogen vacancy here inside the diamond?
Yes, yeah, good question. So there are different ways. So most of all of our diamonds are grown in a lab. So these are not buried not mined somewhere, but they're actually synthetically grown. And these processes are actually really good by now, so that you can't really differentiate between a high purity natural and high purity lab-grown diamond, and you can achieve much higher purity even with these lab-grown diamonds. And there's processes where sometimes so it's not us ourselves, but there's companies that do it because it's quite a challenging engineering project to grow these diamonds. But sometimes you can incorporate these defects already during the growth process. So you would get a diamond out of it that already contains a lot of nitrogen, and then you would also find some of these nitrogen vacancy centers. The other way to do it is to make a very pure diamond and then shoot nitrogen atoms or ions at it. So this is ion implantation, where you then can basically say we want to have defects at the site and also the density and the depth in the diamond, so you can really engineer the diamond that you want to have. So you have a lot of control of your sample on the sensor.
Okay, yeah, it's really cool. I mean, it's interesting actually. Yeah. And this NV centers can work at the room temperature, right?
Yes, so this is one of the main advantages that we have. So this means that, first of all, the experimental setup gets much easier because cooling things down is difficult and expensive. And it also opens up a lot of interesting applications, actually. So one thing that you asked before is, when will we see these quantum sensors in our daily life? And being able to be used at room temperature is one main advantage for this, because you will not be able to carry around a device that cools something to very low temperatures. So you could, so people or companies are already working on integrating these diamonds onto chips that maybe sometimes will be in phones or other electrical devices that are really portable. And and other applications are, for example, in the life sciences, so biology, medicine. Of course, if you want to perform some measurements on living things, often it's not good to cool them down, because most of the time that's not possible. So using these diamonds for measurements there is super interesting.
What kind of measurements do you do usually using these diamonds? So our group is mainly interested in using them for magnetic field measurements. So what is behind that, maybe if I can go a bit more in depth, is that these nitrogen vacancy centers are spins, so electronic spins. So basically they act as like tiny compass needles. So in the magnetic field, they will like have some interaction between external magnetic field and their spin. And via this interaction, we can then measure the magnetic field. And why that is interesting for us is because magnetic fields are quite interesting, because there are some applications, for example, studying new magnetic materials. Like magnetism is super interesting. Like if you go to applications, hard drives, or maybe spintronics, so the idea to make electronics but using spins instead of current for it. So there's many magnetic materials that you want to study, and this is one platform that you can use for that. And the other thing is that when you can measure magnetic fields, you can also measure current, because every current will produce a magnetic field. So like if you map out the magnetic field, you can then reconstruct what the underlying current is. So it's actually a lot of things that you can do by measuring the magnetic field. Okay, I see.
So apart from the magnetic field, you can also measure electric fields, or actually temperature as well, and pressure. For example, temperature is quite interesting because you can use these diamonds and put them inside living cells. So this is an interesting application, again, because it works at room temperature. You can actually do that. and you can make very small diamonds, nano diamonds, and put them in a cell and measure the temperature there, and then learn something about like the activities in a cell, for example. So really biology applications that you can do with this temperature measurement.
Okay. I was wondering if you can measure the magnetic field produced by single atoms. Can you measure it?
By a single atom is very challenging. So then the question is also, is it from the nuclear spin or from the electronic spin? And for example, we can use NV centers to measure the nuclear spin, but usually it's from an, so if you measure something outside the diamond, usually it's hundreds, thousands of spins, something like that in the order. So from a single spin, it's outside the diamond, it's not possible. What you can do is to measure, so it's sensitive enough to detect single spins, but this is just inside the diamond in a very small environment around our sensor, around this NV center. So for example, we can detect other NV centers around our NV center that we use for measurements. So basically see like where are the NV centers distributed in the diamond.
I see. Okay.
Yes, so this is one application that we are working towards, that you want to use these NV centers to create a 3D structure of proteins. So proteins are super important for all of biology, and especially the structure is something that plays a big role, and it's quite difficult to measure. And the idea is that if you can use your NV center, your single quantum sensor, to detect other single spins, you can then detect where the spins in this protein are and then create a 3D structure of it.
I see. I imagine that I can hold these small sensors in my hand, right? It could be very small, or it could be very like my phone or something else, right? Okay. Actually, before I thought maybe this sensor is like as big as a room or as big as this table. So I imagined like something like this. Really.
So yeah, I mean, you're right in one aspect that. Well, the sensor you can hold in your hand, but you often need a lot of things around the sensor to actually perform the measurement. So currently our measurement setup looks like that we have a small diamond, so it's usually a few millimeter crystal, but then around this we have an optical table with lasers, with electronics, so this is really like a small room to perform this measurement. But it is possible to actually minimize this, to really make it much smaller. So different ways of reading out the sensors, where you don't need a huge optical table. And these will then hopefully allow it sometime in the future to be integrated really in a small handheld device.
Okay. And when is the future? Like, I would imagine like next 10 years probably I would have this kind of device, like very small, portable size.
That is always a difficult question to predict the future of such a technology. I mean, I can say that we should separate applications for science and for normal human beings. Okay, that sounds a bit weird, but just like normal everyday applications. So for science applications, it's already here. So there are companies where you can go and buy a diamond-based microscope where you can measure magnetic fields with it. For these applications where you really would have it in your cell phone, I would guess probably 20 years, 10 years maybe, but so companies are working on it, and it's definitely being developed.
Okay, then it's not, I mean, this field is not only the field who only in the level of fundamental science, right? Actually, there are some companies also working.
Yes.
Yeah, I would say that it's very close to application, so to applied physics.
How you come from the defect in the diamond to the results or the image of the things you are measuring?
Yeah, so what we are usually doing is perform magnetic field imaging. So you can imagine if you now have this sensor inside your diamond, you can measure the magnetic field at this point. So you will get one value. So for example, you could measure the Earth's magnetic field at this position.
I see.
But usually what we want to use is one of the main advantages of the sensor, and that is that, as I've described, it is a single atom really, right? So it's this nitrogen vacancy center, so maybe 2 atoms, right? But it's an atomically small sensor, and that is the smallest sensor you can build basically. And the advantage of that is that with this we can achieve a very high spatial resolution. So what we usually do is we take one of these defects and we move it across our sample. And then, yes, we scan it, so it's a scanning probe measurement. And then at every point we will perform this magnetic field measurement. So then in the end you will end up with a map basically of the magnetic field above your sample. And now the thing is that the size of the sensor determines the spatial resolution. You can kind of think about it in a way that if you want to measure the topography, so the height profile of your sample, if you have very fine structure and you're trying to feel it with your finger, you will not be able to, because the finger or your sensor is larger than the structure.
Yeah.
But if you use a small needle, you'll be able to feel these tiny differences. And the same kind of works with this sensor. So if you have a large magnetic field sensor, like a classical sensor, you can also perform this measurement, but you'll not be able to measure very small spatial changes in the magnetic field. Yeah, so this is the usual idea behind the measurement, and how it works is that we would usually select a single NV center in the diamond and then bring it very close to our sample and then perform the scanning measurement and perform a measurement at every point, and in the end we will end up with this map of the magnetic field.
Okay, then spatial resolution of this scanning microscope is highly dependent on the tip size, right?
Yes.
Or what other parameters you have to care?
Yes, so that is an interesting point. So the tip size is something that is very true when you look at, for example, atomic force microscopy. So this is this measurement technique that I've just described, where you try to feel a height difference with your finger, just scale it down very much so you can actually see single atoms. And for this, it makes sense that if your tip is smaller, you get higher spatial resolution. We have an approach that is a bit different to using this tip, but actually used a sensor, or the size of our sensor of the diamond is much larger than the feature size that we want to have. Because we are not interested in measuring this height profile, but we're interested in measuring the magnetic field. And for this, only the size of our magnetic field sensor is important. So because the sensor is atomically small, we can put it in a much larger structure if we are able to bring it close to our sample and perform this measurement, and we'll get the same resolution as if you would put it in a very sharp tip.
I see. I was wondering how this NV scanning probe microscopy is different than the STM, for example.
Yeah, so the application that I mentioned, where you can already go out and buy such a device from a company, works in a very similar way. So in the end, it's an atomic force microscope, but just that the tip is made out of diamond, and at the very end you have this NV center, and then you also need some additional optics and electronics to read out this NV center, but it would be a very similar measurement process. But as I said, how we are working, so this other approach to it, it's quite different from an AFM setup. So AFM usually would have a tip where the radius is few nanometers, so it's really tiny. Our scanning probe is actually 50 micrometers large, so that is huge compared to such a tip. But the point is that our NV center is the sensor, and therefore we can still achieve the same spatial resolution when it comes to this magnetic field imaging. We just have to make sure that the distance between our sensor and the sample is similar. So if you're very far away from the sample, the magnetic field structure is kind of blurred out. So you can imagine that if you have very small structure that changes on the nanometer scale, we have to be on the order of a distance of few nanometers in order to detect this. If you're much far away, you will not be able to detect any of these small changes.
I see. Okay. The one question just came to my mind. So, if you have some kind of surface and the molecular layer or molecular assembly, so probably you cannot use this measurement, right? Because when you go closer to the surface, so it may disrupt the molecular layer. If you go further, so again
it will be quite tough, but we've actually achieved this. So for our measurement, what is important is that the sample is flat. So you can imagine that if you have a large curvature or high roughness in the sample, then you need a sharp tip to get very close. But if you have a flat sample, which most samples are, because we prepare them on some chips or something, then it's actually possible to get this close. And we don't have to touch the surface for this measurement. So if we are very careful, you can have your molecular layer and you come very close to a distance of maybe like 50 nanometers or so. This is still far away from the molecules, but you can then achieve a resolution of on the orders of 50 nanometers.
And during this process, during the experimental process, what's the main engineering problems, engineering headaches, and when things go wrong usually?
So one big problem is that when I mention these very small length scales, so nanometers, one can already imagine that vibrations are a huge problem. So if you have like a vibration in your sample, so let's say we have this case where we have a very sensitive sample, some molecules on the surface, we carefully approach it and there is like someone steps on the optical table or bumps it, you can imagine that it would probably crash into the sample or change the height that we measure at. So reducing vibrations is a big problem. But then there's all other kinds of things. So in general, making sure that the distance stays constant during this measurement. Because the distance determines like what kind of signal we will measure at the end. And if you don't make sure that the distance for your scan is constant, your measurement doesn't make any sense because you're measuring physical quantities at different points above the sample. So that doesn't help you at all. And there's so vibrations are a thing, but you can also imagine things that you have to take care that you maybe don't think about in the first place, which is thermal expansion. So we need some electrical signals for the readout. So this means if you make this approach and then you turn on your current to perform this, you will heat up the sample, it expands, and the distance will change. So there's many of these small things to make sure that the scan works at a constant distance.
I see. Just imagine if you have a power, you can improve one of these parameters like 10 times. What would this be?
It would be the efficiency with which we can read out the NV center. So when we perform a measurement, so when I say we perform a measurement, what we actually do is we perform like 1 million measurements per point per NV center in order to get a good signal for our measurement. And there's few reasons why it can't be a single measurement, as you'd imagine. For example, one of them that is a bit easier to explain is the diamond. Another problem with the diamond is that it has a high refractive index. So this means that the light from the NV centers that is emitted from the NV centers, well, it has to exit the diamond so that we can detect it, and with this light we then perform this measurement. And the light actually is very hard to get outside of the diamond because of this high refractive index.
I see. Can you tell us about the other applications, like the applications in the military, for example, or the medicine? Probably, you talk about the proteins.
Yes.
Maybe it's related to the medicine. And what about the military applications or the other things?
Yeah. So one interesting, or probably I mean, from the military application, it's always hard to know what they're using because it's not public. But one thing that we know that is being used and being researched is to use it for navigation. So quantum sensors can have very high sensitivity for magnetic fields. And this means that they can be used for navigation by using the Earth magnetic field. So the Earth magnetic field, I mean, it's a very old technology, right? It doesn't sound super exciting when we talk about a compass needle, but this is of course taken to the next level. So the idea is that the Earth's magnetic field is not very homogeneous, so it actually has quite a lot of deviations. And if you're able to map these the magnetic field, you'll be able to tell where you are on our Earth just by measuring the magnetic field on your position, or maybe in some small area, and comparing to this measurement that you had before.
I see.
They can also be used as gyroscopes. So this means measuring rotation or acceleration, actually, and this is also an application for navigation, where instead of using GPS, magnetic field, you just track how far or how much you accelerate, and just by that you then determine where you've gone. So this is another way of navigation.
I see.
Yeah. There are some more exotic things, like using them for detecting
like some electronic frequencies, but yeah, this is probably the most interesting one. Other applications are so if you go back to this measurement of currents that I've talked about. So firstly measuring the magnetic field, and then calculating the current that creates the magnetic field. This is really interesting for the semiconductor industry, because the computer chips you're using nowadays use currents in very small integrated circuits, and they are on the length scale of nanometers. And if you want to find out what is really going on in this computer chip, so let's say you design something and then it doesn't work, or you want to find how you can improve it, you need to be able to measure with very high spatial resolution this current flowing. And this is what you could use such a system because of the high spatial resolution.
I see.
And similar to this is another biology application, actually like finding out how our brain works. So in the end, it's quite similar to these computer chip applications, because information in our brain is also sent as electrical currents in the end. So if you want to find out more about how this information is sent, between different cells in our brain. You need to be able to measure this very small current, again with high spatial resolution, because these cells are quite small. And there you could, again, use quantum sensors, especially like NV centers with high spatial resolution to really map out this neural activity.
I see. I just think about, you talk about the brain, so it's maybe off topic. So what do you think, our brain is quantum system or classical?
Oof. That is a question that is really interesting. And it's also like a research field that is currently emerging. And I find it quite funny because people are saying that, like one part of the scientists is saying, of course it's a quantum system, because, I mean, chemistry is going on inside us, and chemistry is quantum physics, basically, in the end. And the other people are saying it's like a biological system, it's room temperature, there's very few quantum effects that work at room temperature, so there's no way. I would say that we can probably describe a lot of the brain with classical physics, and we are still not at the level where we need to use quantum mechanics to find out more about the brain, so there's still so much that's not known, and I don't think that we need to explain with quantum physics.
I see. Okay, then my last question, so I ask this question to everyone, so it's interesting for me. So in the history of physics, or in the history of science, there are two scientists which people usually put face to face, or they compare them. So it's Isaac Newton and Albert Einstein. So the people are discussing which one of them, like, the greatest scientist. So what do you think? Who is the greatest scientist in the history of the humankind?
Do I have to decide between these two?
Or you have another option? You can add.
That is a difficult question. I would say that currently Einstein probably is the one that I would say, just because the range of fields that were updated, or physics that we know about, that he has worked on. So everything from basically like starting quantum mechanics, photoelectric effect, but also relativity, of course. So it's maybe more that his work is more relevant for us working today. So that's maybe why I would think that he was more impactful.
And I think he also gave maybe 20 or 30 people a Nobel Prize. So people are just investigating what he predicted, and they won Nobel Prize most of the time. Okay, it was a delight. Thank you, Paul. So it was very informative, actually. I hope we will do this again, maybe in the future. So good luck in your research. And thank you so much.
Thank you very much. It was a pleasure to do this. So a lot of fun. And also to you. Best of you for your ongoing work.